And we are live. Hello, Facebook. Hello, webinar, Zoom webinar attendees, and hello, hopefully, podcast listeners. Welcome to the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. My name is Simmy Hundal, and I'm the founder and host of this monthly webinar. We're kicking off our second season today, and I'm glad that you viewers, you listeners could join us for the next 45 minutes, either on the Zoom call, live on Facebook, or again, through our podcast. I am ecstatic that I get a chance to speak with and more so listen to our fantastic guests that we have today. More on that in just a moment. But let me start with what this thing is, especially for new members that are joining the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement for the first time. So what is this exactly? Well, it started out as a literal march, in downtown Atlanta in February 2020, for me to express my discontent with the divisive and destructive state of American politics and calling to action people to respond. With the encouragement and participation of my partner, Dinah Jang, and childhood friend, Hans Yadov, we took our picket signs through downtown Atlanta. It's kind of funny to think about it right now. But it took a lot of bravery, courage, and support from them in order to do that. So thanks again to them. We finished our march at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the home of Atlanta United, the most unifying professional sports team in transplant-heavy Atlanta, from the National Center for Human and Civil Rights, which further inspired us with a quote from Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world." Over the next 8 months, we organized into the virtual webinar that is presented to you today. We march on each Tuesday after the first Monday of each month, similarly to Election Tuesday in November, counting down from February to October at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as our work is not over at 5, especially with the current state of affairs. Our values are in the name: unity, humanize the other side, recognizing we are one people; civility, sympathize with others by respectfully listening; and political engagement. I actually just started journaling this year, and I wrote down something that was a little less eloquent in my journal, but I said, paraphrasing, kick millennials and others in the butt to take responsibility for the action of their political leaders in their country. Well, I'm testing Dr. Mead's theory today and through this series, and I hope that you will too. Now with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Darrell Malone Jr. Darrell is a technologist that employs a number of technologies that we'll talk about today in order to combat the American criminal justice system, providing support to the underprivileged. That's done both through the court system, through the Tubman Project, which he is supporting today through some swag, as well as he also focuses on police enforcement accountability through the National Police Data Coalition. Darrell, it's an honor to have you on. It's been so cool to talk to you, and welcome to the show.
Oh man, thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here.
For sure, for sure. So before we get started with our program, I want to go over a quick disclaimer, talk about a couple of high-level housekeeping items, and then we'll get right into the program to hear from Darrell. So quick disclaimer, as always, I do not have all the answers nor the authority in the spaces and topics that we discuss. In fact, I likely have less than many of the viewers that have so graciously joined today. And today is no different. I have had limited experiences with the criminal justice system and law enforcement. The times that I have had these experiences, I found police officers and judges, among others, to be fair and respectful. I recognize, however, that not everyone has had my experience with the system and law enforcement. Also, have not spent a single day as an African-American in my life. And I recognize that some of the topics may be considered sensitive that I talk about today. This discussion, for what it's worth, comes from a place of respect, openness, and what I call healthy judgment to have constructive dialogue, building better bridges between communities. However, I understand that I may fall short of that, and I ask Darrell and our viewers for understanding and grace. I ask the same on behalf of Darrell to you listeners. by having this safe space in the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement, I feel that we can encourage people to share their true feelings and experiences so that we all may learn and grow instead of speaking past one another and staying siloed. So that's the disclaimer. And now let me go quickly into the format. We're gonna have 3 segments today. It's gonna be a prepared question section that I'm super excited to pick Darrell's brain on. We're going to have a rapid fire section where both Darrell and I will respond to opinionated statements and share whether we agree or disagree with those statements. And lastly, we will have a Q&A for any ad hoc questions that our viewers may have. You may enter those questions into the Q&A section of the program by clicking the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom call and entering in your question, and I'll do my best to ask them today. As if you're half as excited to speak with Darrell, I'm sure you'll have questions to ask of him. So with that, why don't we get straight into the prepared questions section? You ready, Darrell?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Nice, man. Me too. Okay, so why don't we start on the Tubman project. It's an effort to develop advanced tech for public defenders to lower the cost of legal defense. And the National Police Data Collaborative, your second organization that you've putting a lot of energy into this year, I believe, is an organization devoted to unite police accountability activism into a singular force of transparency and justice. For each of these initiatives, can you help us understand what the environment is like today and how you envision these environments after the initiatives have made an impact in their spaces? What is the current state and what is the ideal state of these 2 programs?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, before we start, thanks again for having me on. Always happy to really push these ideas out into the world. In terms of the before and after, they're actually very much related. When I started the Tubman project in 2017, I was coming from a software engineer background, and I had this experience that I felt was very unique in terms of kind of being in this industry and having some understanding of these different challenges in a way that I think a lot of people working in tech may not have the ability to appreciate, or opportunity, if we'll call it that, to appreciate things in that way. I saw a lot of flaws in kind of the way that our legal system functioned and was applied, and thought that it would be especially an opportune time to try and correct some of those issues. This was shortly after Trump was elected, and it was a time when I saw America likely to be moving down a more authoritarian path, and to becoming more of, or becoming less democratic and less restrained in the way that it applied its system of justice. And my hope was that I could use technology and my knowledge of technology to really push the barrier of access, or the barrier of entry into the legal system at a fair position down, to where it would cover more and more people. And to me, that comes down to really making the process more efficient, right? I took a look at, okay, what is the kind of this low cost barrier? And I found that to be the public defender system, right? This is, as they say, if you don't have an attorney, one will be appointed to you. This is kind of that way that a lot of people, it's their only defense against a system that has kind of been erected and built and is really run to manage them. So my thought was that you have public defenders that are in large part overworked, under-resourced in terms of the challenges that they need to meet. And in turn, their clients are disadvantaged as well because of that situation. And so my hope was that by empowering public defenders, making them more able to do their jobs, it would be it would be really raising the bar for everybody, making the system more fair for everybody, right? By operating at that level. So that was the initial plan. It was really to engage artificial intelligence technology and automation in this process, to take a lot of the routine tasks that public defenders need to go through and kind of eliminate as much of that work as possible. And to do that through really building more or less a movement of people who are working to meet those goals. I'm a big proponent of open source technology, and really the idea that people within a community, people who are civically active, can really engage in building technology and use that as a way to make change in the world. And my goal was to provide the structures for that to take place. So I started doing a lot of that through hackathons, through basically creating events where people could try and tackle these challenges. And I started that here in Houston in 2017. Had a very big impact on me and a lot of other people that were involved, and really got me started on this path of beginning to understand how the justice system and technology intersect. One of the things that came out of that was a real understanding of how undeveloped the legal system is in the United States. This is a country that is really a collection of countries. It's a federal system. That means every state has its own legal system. It has a certain amount of independence in how it designs that system. That breaks down even further when you get into the county level and on and on. And so one of the downsides of that is there isn't really a cohesive way to look at that system computationally, right? I started out really interested in AI and machine learning and these sorts of data analysis problems, and found that there was really no data to analyze at all, right? So one of the first things that I found with the Tubman project was, forget even designing, AI, we've got to design a better environment for these tools to really function in. And through that process, I got involved with a lot of people who are interested in the dataverse, as you want to call it, of the United States, Measures for Justice, people who have been involved in projects such as CAPSTAT, which is a project looking at collecting data on police encounters in New York. There are similar projects in Chicago. There's Fatal Encounters, which is kind of doing this media landscape overview. There are all of these different ways that people are engaging with the justice system and trying to understand and organize that data. Once 2020 hit and George Floyd happened, that became, for me, a catalyst to move my work in another direction. Obviously, 2020, this is when the world more or less shut down. Doing in-person hackathons and things like that were no longer on the menu. We actually had our events for the year canceled for the Tubman Project. And so I found myself really with a lot of energy and nowhere to really put it. I ended up engaging with a lot of the people who I knew and who I had met during my work on the Tubman Project, and trying to figure out how can we really tackle directly this problem of police accountability, right? How can we work directly on that part of the system? And what arose out of that was the NPDC, the National Police Data Coalition. It's no different when you look at police data compared to the rest of the justice system. It's all fragmented, it's all siloed. And so as I spoke to some of these different people within the field, it became clear that there was a real hunger for connecting all of these different sources of data, right? There's a real hunger for being able to take all of this and turn it into a single view. There are just common problems that arise when you don't have that ability. When you have, for example, a police officer who is known to be violent, but they're known to be violent in another state or in another city. And once they move into your city, or if they've been shuffled around from place to place, you really don't have visibility into that. The police department that hired them doesn't have visibility into that. You know, there's not really this way to hold people accountable, and you end up with a sort of shuffling that happens of moving bad officers from one place to another. So there's kind of this gap in really creating a system that is even capable of being accountable. And so we really worked to solve those issues, to create one common landscape and one common area where you could even try to even see where the problems are, right? And so for the time being, it's it's a big lift to really create that environment, to create this space where you have common standards, where different people in different areas can talk to each other. And then ideally, my goal is to move from there to having an ability to think as one, right? To be able to understand as one group of activists, as one group of attorneys, as one group of journalists, what it is that we're actually dealing with in America, and really start to act on that information. So that's really my goal as the output for all of this activity.
How cool, man. I'm actually, give me just a moment. Sorry about that, Darrell and other
The joys
folks.
of co-working.
Exactly. Welcome to Impact Hub on the 10th floor of the M&G Bank building in downtown Houston. We actually had a particularly avid fan wanting to join in person. But I will chat with you in a little bit, Carlos. Sorry about that. A couple of things. You corrected me, and I wasn't corrected in the actual statement of my question. National Police Data Coalition is the name of your organization. Thank you for sharing about that. I'm also struck by something that we started to talk about earlier in this, before we went live with this call, Darrell. We talked about how one of these organizations is informing the other. Your work in technology is informing your work with these nonprofit organizations. I am struck by the idea that data, actually tracking data, measuring data, having that uniform set of data is applicable for both the police accountability piece, which is of course in the name, but also for the Tubman project, where you're talking about these huge lifts and not having data to actually work with in order to provide technological solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes even further beyond that, right? I mean, there's this common trope, if you listen to kind of the chattering, intellectual group around the country, of data is the new oil, right? This idea that now we're going to move from a world of, we're taking in resources and processing them and moving them forward, to now we, the people, are the resources, right? And we are now to be used and harvested and brought into these giant machines and packaged and resold. And I think a big part of the challenge of our age, and of really moving through the information age in the same way that we had moved through the industrial revolutions that have come before, is taking back that power, right? The idea of a data coalition is really to say that the people that generate the data, that is then going to be later consumed and used to create products, to create information, to create power, should be controlled by those people that have that data and create that data. It shouldn't necessarily be owned by Amazon, for example, or Facebook, right? And so I think that there is a potential to take the work that is being done by the NPDC now and have that applied and have those learnings used in areas such as, for example, healthcare data, right? Or even things like viewing data in terms of videos and things like that, and start to really take some of this information that's being developed and make sure that it's being used in a way that benefits the wider society and doesn't only benefit a tiny sliver of stockholders who have the ability to make those decisions. I think that's a crucial challenge for us in this time.
100%. I was read a little bit about the hackathon, one of the hackathons that you did with the Tubman Project, and one of the winners of the hackathon, their thesis or their idea was to use Google tracking data, anonymized, in order to provide an alibi that you are actually in a different place than the prosecutors suggest or are claiming that you were, in order to come up with a defense. And I think that's an awesome example of what you're describing, actually being able to own the data that is being collected, this powerful information that is being created and being used to the benefit of very select individuals, but actually putting that in the hands of the public for a public good.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. Well, let me reintroduce you for the attendees and reintroduce this program really quick. Thank you so much for everyone that's joined recently, hopefully including Carlos. My name is Simmy Hundal, and I'm the organizer of the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement, where we try to build better bridges between communities through listening, learning, and sympathy. And I have the pleasure of talking with Darrell Malone Jr. He is a technologist that is using his experience, his skill set to provide tools and resources to the underprivileged in the American justice system. I have my second prepared question for you, Darrell. It is a somber one, but I think especially in light of February, Black History Month, excuse me, we should honor that. And I'll go ahead and share that question with you right now. There's a lengthy and depressing history of America abusing people of color, especially African Americans, from slavery to segregation, from redlining, which is the discriminatory practice in which services are withheld, to the new Jim Crow, which is mass incarceration. Both of your initiatives we've discussed seem to be generally open-minded, good faith initiatives to improve systems. But then you are faced with such painful, inflammatory events like the killing of unarmed Black men by police officers. How do you stay productive? I get the "we're not going to take it" attitude. That's the theme for this month. That's a natural and knee-jerk reaction. But what is it that keeps you moving in such a positive way?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I actually have, it's not easy, you know, it's not an easy thing. I think I always like this story of Cassandra, right? This is like an ancient, I think it's a Greek myth of this woman who insulted one of the Greek gods, and so she was cursed with the gift of knowledge, right? And so she had the ability to be able to see clearly what was going to happen in the future, what was happening now. But anytime she tried to tell anybody, she couldn't be listened to, right? And there's always this kind of feeling of being that character, right? Of being in this position where you see something and you can understand something, but you have no power to change that. And I think for me, there's just a refusal to accept that sort of powerlessness, you know? And I think personally, I come from not necessarily the most prestigious backgrounds at all. I've, kind of been in the startup space, and I've worked a lot of times for myself, exactly because there was no way for me to necessarily get hired by places. So I would make my own way forward. And having that experience, I think, definitely helps me to feel confident enough that I can really push forward. And in those times when it does get particularly tough, to just remind myself that I've been here before, I've been through things before, and there's there's that experience to back me. And I think the other thing is just that there's I love the expression of this, like, we're not going to take it. One of my favorite mantras is, we're the only ones here. At the end of the day, all of the problems and issues that exist in this world will be solved by the people who live in it. There are no gods who are going to come in and make decisions about how things are going to go, and what gods there are act through us. They act through people who are willing to put in the work, who are willing to put in the time to make things happen. And the fact of the matter is, if there isn't that sort of spirit of real change coming from the people who have power, then it falls to the people who don't to act anyway, right? The incentives are just made in such a way that once you reach certain levels, you're generally not expected or even incentivized to change anything. And what little change you are pushed to do happens through philanthropy, which great book, Anand Giridharadas, kind of covers how philanthropy ends up really just being a way to launder power in order to perpetuate it. And so it really does fall to the people who have experiences with the issues of this world to create change. And I just see that as a chronic state of the world, that there just have to be those people out there who are willing to push and who are willing to fight for what it is that they need to see. And, it's not going to be everybody for sure, but there will be those people out there, and those people need to be able to push forward and to be able to generate and drive the support that they get from the rest of the populace to push things and to really see that through. It's a hard truth, but it's a necessary thing. And yeah, that's all there is to it.
I love that mantra. We're the only ones. It falls on our shoulders to make the change that we want to see in the world. And again, hats off. This is not the end of the call, but hats off for doing that in your space, Darrell.
I'll try.
The third, for sure, man. Well, you're doing more than trying. The third question gets into the tech space, and we could have a whole nother session just on tech with you, but I want you to dumb it down for the rest of us. You've worked in crypto, you've worked in blockchain, artificial intelligence, and machine learning spaces, from my understanding. What is a low-hanging fruit tech that activists can start implementing to leverage? When you speak to other activists, social entrepreneurs, do you find a common theme of opportunity in a certain technology or type of implementation?
Not necessarily, no. I think that activists and technologists are not always in the same circles, right? That's kind of a sad truth, is that a lot of the people who and I think about things systemically, so I don't want to cast aspersions on individuals. I'm talking about systemic things. But a lot of the people who operate in tech, they're able to operate in tech because they have certain advantages. Like there's this idea of, the person who drops out of college and does things. Well, number one, it's not necessarily everybody that's going to college. Number two, usually those colleges are like Harvard and MIT and things like that. So it's not necessarily you're just a kid off the street. Like there's a selection process of people that get into these industries and that have the ability and the capital to buy machines that are able to really work on these sorts of things, to buy the cloud computing time that's needed to do all of that that is required to really get in tech, to have a startup, to have or even work for one. Right? It's not something that necessarily lends itself automatically to activism, and in fact, the opposite is true. Despite that, I do see technologies that really lend themselves to especially movement building and really creating change. Obviously, I feel that machine learning technologies are one of those that has a lot of potential. The other one is, I think people misunderstand the crypto space. I've been working in crypto since 2014, right? And while what people know it for is this idea of currencies and NFTs, and you're going to create assets and you're going to be trading them and you're going to be doing all of this and all of that. And I think that that's the natural place to start, especially in the very financialized late stage capitalism that we're in. That's kind of an obvious place for these sorts of technologies to find a home, and to really build up this capital that they need to do other things. But I think the benefit of these technologies is the other things that they can do. I like to really talk about blockchain technology as one of these foundational technologies. And when I say foundational, I don't mean, like an app. I mean foundational in the way that writing and electricity are foundational, and that they create a platform through which the entirety of humanity can move to new levels. It's a collaborative technology, right? It's a technology that allows people to work together in ways that just weren't possible before, right? Before we had written language, you could not pass on knowledge and structures and these sorts of things you could barely pass it on from one person to the next, let alone from one generation to the next. Once you have writing, you have the ability to create things that can outlive human beings. And I think that laws, another good example of this, laws in general are a way to allow something that is a tribe, right? Where you're very limited in the number of people that you can interact with and cooperate with and work with by people that you can know and build trust with, to now you've put that trust into another system. And then that allows the entire community to work together in ways that they couldn't before, and to take on projects that there was no way for them to be able to take on before. I think the blockchain is one of these technologies that creates that step change in the way that humans are being able to work together. It does so in the sense of allowing our computers and our software to collaborate in ways that they previously couldn't. One of the ways that we're using this in the MPDC, just to give you an example, the idea is that you have an index of all of these incidents of police violence that take place across the country. Now, all of that data is not necessarily publicly available, and sometimes it can't be. If you are a person who's maybe witnessed something that a police officer has done, and maybe you're in one of these cities where the police will retaliate against you if they know that you're working against them. If you have any sort of case, if you have any sort of issue with them, which, if we remember, for example, Ferguson, that was like 2/3 of the population had some sort of citation or ticket or what have you. And now you've opened yourself up to this potential method of pressure. So you may not want your identity to be shared, right? You may want to be very careful about who you share this data with. And if we're stuck in a phase of personal trust, that means that there's a hard limit into how many people can really get access to that data and use it. It's definitely not something that can benefit the entire community. Once you have systems that allow you to build in ways that your privacy can be preserved, but your data can still be accountable, right? Once you have a way that you can make a claim that this is absolutely what happened at a particular time, and you can check back against it. And if someone sees that later and they've altered it, you have a way to say, no, this is not what I said. This is not what I had. This is untrue. Once you have structures that can actually support this level of really creating a shared truth without creating a completely, without completely de-anonymizing everybody involved in that system, you have ways that you can now create this collective consciousness, this collective set of data that is valuable without necessarily creating a lot of those privacy issues and challenges going forward. So this is just one example, you know, and I think that there are other areas where this ability to have this these systems of communication will really be useful for making sure that people can work together, people can collaborate in ways that don't require a centralized system that leaves them open to being attacked or abused in different ways.
That's awesome, man. I feel like you doing a small video clip of how foundational blockchain is, the power of it, and associating it with the scale that you mentioned, sharing its similarities to other changes and evolutions in human history would inspire a lot of people to look a little bit more closely at a career in blockchain. Thank you for going into detail into that. I'm going to do a quick reintroduction before I move to the second segment, which is the rapid response segment of this program. We have about 8 minutes left, 7 minutes left of the program. If you do have a question, please click the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom webinar screen, and I'll do my best to get to that question. And reintroduction of the program. This is the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. I'm Simmy Hundal, and that's Darrell Malone Jr. He is a technologist, and he is applying that technology skill set to a couple of programs. One is the Tubman Project, which helps the underprivileged in the court system to lower the cost and burden of defense. And the second is the National Police Data Coalition, which is an organization that's devoted to unite police accountability activism. So we are moving now to the rapid response section. There's going to be two themes around the same two areas that I just mentioned, both around the American criminal justice system, but one is associated with the courts and the second is associated with law enforcement. I'm going to make an opinionated statement, and I am going to then have Darrell respond whether he agrees or disagrees with that statement. I will respond and share my opinion of that statement, whether I agree or disagree. And if Darrell and I do not have that same answer, then we will go into a 30-second debate as to why we feel the way that we do. This is to, again, not to point a finger and said, Darrell thinks this way, he's wrong, or Simmy thinks that way and he's right. It's more so to share openly how we feel about a certain issue to gain a better understanding and build those bridges that we talked about earlier. So without further ado, I'll get right into it, Darrell. First, opinionated statement. The criminal justice system is fair. Do you agree or disagree, Darrell?
Disagree.
Okay. I also disagree. And again, this is as it pertains to the courts. Second statement, American public defenders, meaning the lawyers that are made available to defendants in courts that cannot, for individuals, defendants that cannot afford their own legal representation, they have adequate resources. Darrell?
Strong disagree.
Not just disagree, I also disagree. Third statement, relative to other democracies, criminal justice systems and courts, the American court system is fair? Darrell.
I think it's hard. This is a hard one for me to call. I don't have enough experience with other justice systems to say for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably argue that if we were to limit it to kind of developed countries and the legal systems within developed countries, my assumption would be no. I think that our system is much more infiltrated, really by money. It's much more of a justice that you can afford sort of situation in the US, which I don't think would necessarily be the case in the rest of the developed world.
That is a good point. My first reaction to that statement, and I of course have the benefit of knowing these statements ahead of time, as opposed to Darrell just hearing them right now. My reaction to that is based off of what little I know of other criminal justice systems and courts. I feel that the American criminal justice system is relatively fair. I, like Darrell, have not done enough homework to fully understand it, but I 100% take note of what you're saying, Darrell, in terms of the effect of money, in terms of determining outcomes, and having access to lawyers and legal defense representation makes a difference in the outcome. So
one thing I would highlight is the cash bail system, which I know is a big topic of discussion where we both are in Houston, which is, I think, idiosyncratic to the US in the way that it's applied and has a big impact on the outcomes.
That's a point well taken. Well said, Darrell. So I'm going to move now to law enforcement branch of the American criminal justice system. And I will make an opinionated statement, and I will respond first, and then Darrell, you'll respond, agree or disagree. First statement: law enforcement is an easy, straightforward job. I disagree.
I would disagree.
Police departments and officers have the support they need to do their job. I would disagree.
I would say more than enough.
More than enough, meaning that you agree?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So I'll share my opinion first. I feel that the scope of work that police officers have is too wide. I'll take a silly example. I lost my cell phone in Atlanta, and I went on a silly social media rant about how the police department is inefficient, yada, yada, yada. They also are responsible, for my understanding, for things like lost dogs. They take phone calls when there's like minor fender benders that come into play, and they also come out and serve individuals that might have mental health illness, as opposed to having maybe better resources or better equipped people that have a background in working with those individuals. So I feel at times that they don't have, maybe this is an indirect support, but the indirect support required in order to handle this myriad of situations that fall in their lap in terms of type of work that they do. But Darrell, your thoughts?
So government, right, or really running any organization, there's a triage involved, right? You never have enough money to do everything you want to do, and I think that applies just generally speaking. Your eyes are always going to be bigger than your stomach in that sense. Now, when you look at policing, this is the largest single budget in just about every major city in the United States. Every single one. So the idea that this is a group of people that are under-resourced in their ability to do their jobs, then I can only imagine what the people dealing with homelessness must go through, people dealing with child services must go through. If this is the largest budget and it's still not enough, then that's just saying we don't have enough money to run governments. Now, we can get into that discussion separately, but in terms of,
percentage.
Putting it, yes, in terms of putting it into a context of working within a limited budget in general, police probably have more money than they need. And I'll also add that it is one of the few institutions that has no process for withdrawing that budget. Every other institution within a government, there's some pressure in terms of the money that's spent. But at the local levels, when you're talking about policing, and at the larger level, when you're talking about the military industrial complex, these are only areas that get increases. These are only areas that get increases and that make more money as they fail. As they fail to do their job, they attract more investment. And I think that's a unique dynamic that is really problematic long run.
Thank you for getting into that. There's a few concepts and information that you shared that I didn't think about there. And yeah, that I can understand where you're coming from in terms of resource allocation for them. Well, with that, we are actually 1 minute past our time. So out of respect of the time for the viewers, out of respect of time for Darrell, I'm gonna start closing up. Thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation with Darrell, as you can probably tell from the many wide smiles that I had today. Thank you again, Darrell, for sharing your experience, your perspective, your insights. And also, I want to say, frankly, thank you for being open to some sensitive conversations and topics that we talked about today.
Absolutely.
For sure, Darrell. I also want to thank viewers, friends, and family for joining in. Specifically, I want to thank my partner, Diana Jang, who's been supporting me since day one of the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. I want to thank Grant Hill, who is another member of Impact Hub in this co-working space, for continuing to encourage me, and Simona Gabriel, who is a new member and my sidekick, so to speak, who's helped me stay track and expand the March. I want to get feedback on this event. Please let me know how you liked it. I'm all ears. And Darrell, I want to give you a chance. I know I just talked over your response to me thanking you, but I want to give you a chance to plug in whatever you would like for 60 seconds. The floor is yours, Darrell.
No, thank you very much. I mean, I think really the big project that I'm working on right now is going to be the MPDC. So that was we just officially founded this past December. So there's still some work to do on the website and everything like that, but you can find it at www.nationalpolicedata.org. So do check that out. You can also find me on just about any social media service. I'm at Darrell K. Malone, so DarrellKMalone. And I usually post things there.
Very cool. And if there's any indication, Darrell's been so generous with his time in the few weeks that I've gotten to know him. And I'm so appreciative, again, for you to come on and share so much, Darrell.
Happy to.
Well, with that, why don't I segue into the next episode? Again, this is the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. We're going to have the next episode at our regularly scheduled time of the Tuesday after the first Monday of the month. So that'll be in March 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, our work is not over at 5. Until then, stay safe, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.